Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. This is English Custom Woodworking. Today I'm going to do another Jack of all trades video. I am going to take myself completely out of my comfort zone and I'm going to work on something that I'm not quite sure if I can fix or not, but I am interested to see if I can do this. So today I have got a Dewalt cordless drill. It is a 18 volt off of NiCad. It's probably about, it's a little bit over a decade old. It's actually probably one of the first cordless drills that I ever bought. It actually doesn't have a lot of miles on it though. So that's kind of why I am frustrated that it is doing what it is doing. And also kind of why I want to see if I can fix it or not. The drill, probably over the past year or so, or a couple years, has always just been it's become a backup drill. I've actually bought some other drills, but it stays in my truck toolbox and it's kind of like my backup drill. But recently it has started acting funny. When you depress the trigger, trying to operate it normally, the motor surges, goes slow, fast, and not being able to be controlled by the trigger. Also, the motor, if you look into the vent ports back here on the back, you can noticeably see a spark, larger spark than what I think that I have ever noticed before. There's probably always a spark that's visible, but it is a lot bigger than what it was, and it's very noticeable. Also, you can smell something burning occasionally, and also you can also see smoke, visible smoke coming out of the vent ports occasionally. So I don't think that it has become unsafe to use per se, but I just don't really want to use it anymore. It doesn't function very well. It does still work, but it just doesn't function very well. I've always kind of thought that this drill was kind of heavy to use anyway. It is the older version, like a Dewalt XRP. So if I'm not mistaken, the XRP, if I remember right, was the top of the line back when these drills kind of came out. It was the heavier duty one. I think that the model number is the DC920 is the exact model number for those that are curious. Also, trying to figure out what's going on. I thought, well, maybe there's something wrong with the battery. It's why it's surging like that and acting funny. I don't think the battery would be causing it to spark more or smoke or smell like it's burning. But I did, for what it's worth, I swapped other batteries out with this and it's still doing the same thing. There has been a considerable amount of black, kind of graphite looking metallic residue all around the rear exhaust ports. So that has led me to believe that the motor is going out. So I did already take it apart just so I can figure out what motor. There is a small motor on the inside back here. It has a model number stenciled across it. So I had to take it apart to get to that number so I could find out what to order. I already ordered the part, and I am going to take this thing apart and see if I can't put it back together. I already kind of took some of it apart, and I will say that there is a transmission up further in the drill, and it is a little bit intimidating, I guess would be the right word, because there are a lot of small sprockets, bearings, some low gears, a lot of grease. The grease in it was kind of dirty. I'm not going to really work on the transmission per se, but if I did, I would probably clean a lot of the parts and then put them back together with new fresh grease. But on this one, I just want to try to replace the motor and see if I can get this thing to run better or run more appropriately. And if I can, maybe I'll take it apart and actually clean it up more to try to get back a little bit more towards new. So let's take this thing apart and see what we got. So also worth mentioning, I have taken this back cap off to clean. I took an air compressor and I've tried to blow a lot of the dust out, and I have cleaned this area a couple different times, and for what it's worth, that did not help, did not affect anything. So I've already taken some of the screws out, but just so people know how these things are made, the first thing you need to do is you need to take the battery pack off. There are multiple screws, some screws down here. So there are 2 screws down here through this part of the casing. There are 4 screws around the metallic mount here in the center, and there are 4 screws along the back cap. All these screws are a Torx T10 for what it's worth. These front ones are longer than the ones in the back. So when you take this thing apart, just be aware that the transmission is in this general area, so it's going to want to come apart from the front too. So when you get all 4 screws out of this front part, there's some amount of spring tension in here, so it will actually want to push this apart. And I would recommend trying to hold this vertical. So this is your kind of what is defined as your transmission here, and then your chuck down here. So try to keep this vertical. If you don't want to mess with it, keep it vertical, and it will save you some headache trying to put some of that stuff together, because this is where some bearings and things are in here. So here's your motor. You can see the end of the motor and the drive, the sprocket drive, gear drive that's coming out on the center drive shaft, and your trigger is here, and your selector for your reverse and forward. So then you'll want to take the back cap off. That will expose the back of the motor, and you can see your wire leads. These wire leads will actually run down through the inside of the casing or the housing and run down to the trigger mechanism. So with all your screws out, I'm holding a little tension here, squeezing this together so stuff just doesn't fall apart. So I'm going to lay it down. I don't think it really matters which direction you lay it down, but the forward part of the drive going this way is the way that I have chose to do it, and it manages to keep everything in. Everything stays into place, so maybe that's the preferable way to do it when you take it apart. So here's one part of the shroud or the shell. Here's your motor, if you can see it. And then there are 2, there's a positive and a negative, and they are marked on the back of the motor. There's a plus sign and a minus sign, or maybe just a plus sign. Yeah, the positive is marked, and they run down to the trigger mechanism. So also, engraved on the side of this motor housing is some numbers, and this is actually the numbers that I ran to order this motor to find this part. So for what it's worth, this motor, the number 629151-02R is what I ordered to replace this part. The motor wires. I think I'm just gonna, before I took them off the trigger, but I think it would be easier just to unplug the wires from the back of the motor, and then replace the motor and replug that. It should just slide back into place, hopefully. So that came off pretty easy. I'm gonna lift the motor out. I'm gonna pull the -1 off. Okay, and that frees up my motor. It's pretty greasy. There's a lot of residue, like motor dust. So I'll set that to the side. So here is the old motor. Here is the box that my part came in. For what it's worth, I'm not sure if this is going to negatively affect this project or not, but the model number off the old motor was 629151002R. This one is 02SV. When I searched it and I ordered it, it was actually labeled R, but they sent me SV. So we'll see if it works. Let's compare the two. So the only thing that I see different is that the old motor has this shroud, this plastic shroud on the front, and this one does not. There are some screw holes and some screws, so let's try to get these screws out of the end of this plastic shroud and put onto this, and then we'll pop it in and see if it works. So the screws on the back side of this plastic shroud are a T20. There's also a flat tip screwdriver notch, so you can also use a flat tip screwdriver. So also, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there is a very small nipple on the back of this, and that will go into the large hole. There are 3 screw holes, 4 little slots, and then there's a larger hole here. That's where that nipple will sit. And when you do that, that lines it up. It's impossible to turn it, and it lines it up with these other 2 screw holes. So everything seems to be matching so far. So those screws were the same thread. They went in pretty easily. Didn't have to force anything in. Nothing got cross-threaded. Everything spins pretty good. All right, let's try to put it back together. So on the other drill, the positive side was up. I don't really know if that makes any difference or not, but there are some slots on this. One is bigger than the other. This slot is wider, this slot is narrower, and there are some grooves on your shroud, so you definitely are going to have to put this down. The larger slot is down, and then the narrower slot is up for the other side of the shroud. So before I set it in there, I'm going to plug in my negative contact wire, double check myself. Positive on the positive. There is a plus sign on the back side of the new motor. I'm going to try to route my frame, there is a little protective shroud back here that the wires kind of go into. I'm going to try to my best to reuse that. Alright, everything appears to fall back into place. So let's try to put everything back together in reverse order. See how easily this works. Let's see if I can mess this up. So I think I'm going to put one of these screws in on the grip to hold this thing together. And then I think I'm going to also try to put the shroud back on the back side. That might hold some stuff together to try to make this a little bit easier. Okay, so I put a few screws in. Let's test the trigger, check trigger still works, selector stitch still works. So maybe I've got that put together correctly. And then let's put the chuck and the transmission back in. Okay, so for what I was just now doing, the teeth on the drive of the motor had to line up with the teeth on the receiving teeth on the transmission. So they weren't lining up. I was having a little bit of difficulty. So I put the battery back in to just power the motor to just barely get the motor teeth on the drive to just barely turn and sit down and mesh in. It worked just fine. So let's get all the screws back in and see if we can get this thing back together. So everything's back together. The switch on the top seems to be working. The selector switch seems to be working. There's still a battery in it. I think my battery's a little bit weak, but we'll charge the battery up and then we'll try to drill something and see how it works. So interestingly, I noticed that the buttons or the motor was running backwards. I changed the appropriate things. I put positive, negative on the motor, but for some reason, whenever you're hitting the button on the right that should be forward, it was turning the wrong direction, and obviously the same when you hit reverse. So that was kind of annoying. Yeah, it still worked. You just have to get used to the way the buttons are now working where they not really supposed to be, or you can change the wires over. So what I did to fix this is all I did was pull the back cap off. I pulled the wire from the negative and the wire from the positive, and then I swapped them. It's not that big of a deal, other than the wire on the negative is a little bit shorter than the positive wire. I got it to reach, I got it to work, but it is a little bit shorter. So we're gonna put the cap back on and try to use it. So awesome. I think that was generally a success. The new motor appears to be working pretty good. It's not smoking like the other one was. It's not making any crazy noises. Everything seems to be working fine. I drilled a few holes. Of course, a lot of how good the holes are going to drill depends on how sharp the bit is and how good the battery is, but it seemed to be working good. So I think this is a success story. So, you know, is it worth it? New drills are a couple $100, you know, $250, $300, probably at the high end, depending on what you're buying. This does not have a hammer setting, which some of the new drills do have a hammer setting, but I got it to work, so I got a backup drill to start working again. For what it's worth, that motor I found on a website. I am not affiliated or sponsored by anybody, but I found it on fix.com. They had it to me within a couple days. It was around $80. I can't remember if that included the shipping or not, but I mean, 80 bucks versus $200, $250. Time will tell to see how the motor stands up. But we'll see. Once again, it's just a backup drill, so I got my backup drill working again. I appreciate you guys watching. If you wouldn't mind, give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment if you want to, share, subscribe, and keep watching, and I'll have some new videos out soon. And remember, everybody, measure twice and cut once.